Yeah. I had
So
all right, sorry, Brian.
yeah, no,
I know I'm dominating here, sorry.
no, it's
But
all good.
I saw a clip with Jacob Collier during the week,
Hmm.
who, I'll be honest, I just don't get. I appreciate what he's capable of doing with the perfect pitch and all of that,
Mhm.
but it just lacks so much emotion to me that I don't really.
I have to jump in and say, I had a discussion with my wife, who's an operatic singer and theater
Right.
director, artistic director. We were talking about him 3 days ago, and I said the same thing. I said,
Yeah.
because Quincy was working with him, and he's worked with all
Yeah.
sorts of
Yeah.
great people. And when I listen to his stuff, I go, nope, like it's
Yeah.
all the elements are there technically and musically,
Yeah.
but the emotive and there's something's just not matching up. And it right
Yeah.
there, I cut bait on him because you
Yeah.
can have all the talent and all the facility in the world, and it doesn't mean your stuff's. He's great to see live because he conducts the
Yeah.
audience and he does all sorts of
Well,
cool things
that was the
live.
clip that I saw was him conducting the
Yeah,
audience to
yeah.
do like a modal chord or some highfalutin musical term that I don't fully understand, but it sounded amazing.
Yeah.
And I looked at that and I thought people really do underestimate that emotion and that connection that you actually have when you're in an audience and what you're seeing is a great night of your life.
Mhm.
People are unlimited in their
I,
talent
I think that's
because
what
en
somebody like.
masse we're a bell curve, aren't we? There's
Yeah,
going to be greatness in that room that can be
that's right.
taken advantage of.
and
Yeah.
and somebody like Jacob Collier can he can facilitate that in other people. But let's
Mhm.
not forget that it is those people that are the instrument in that
Yeah.
case. Now he may be
Yeah.
conducting them, but like any great conductor, you have to have 105 killer musicians that
Yeah.
know exactly what to do and how much to give. And yes, he can do this, and then he can just tilt and they'll go down a half step, and that's
Yeah.
all cool. And that
Yeah.
is, I guess Prince would have looked at him and said, parlor tricks. He
Yeah.
would have just thought it was a parlor trick and that it wasn't really, because when I listen to the full songs that are arranged and recorded, I never get
Mm.
moved by his stuff. And maybe
No.
that's just I just don't I just don't get him, but
And
I'm
it's
never
really
moved by the
strange
material.
because he's friends with Corey Wong, not Corey Wong, Corey Henry, and Corey
Mhm.
Henry is totally the flip side. Like I've seen Corey Henry perform and just thought, wow, now that's a guy who's invested in what he's delivering to me.
Yeah, there are a whole
Like I
bunch of
believe that guy. Yeah.
there are a whole bunch. I'm not familiar with his work, but there are a whole bunch of musicians that are starting to get it. They're starting to get this stuff starting to sink in about not only Prince's principles of owning things and being in control of things and making that part of your deal, but also the effect that live performance, they just simply have to become good live performers because that's where all the money is.
Yeah.
I was talking with Isaac, the lead singer of the Fray. He's now stepped away from that role in the band. But Isaac, one day I saw him in Chicago and I said, "What's up?" And he said, my song just hit, I don't know what it was, like 20 million listens or some crazy amount. And he said, "I've made like 3 grand off of that." He said, "I can't do that anymore. I just can't."
No.
It's somebody's making money, but I'm not sure. And what I think we miss from Prince in the last 6+ years, 7 years, is the fact that well, first of all, a few things that kind of stun people. He didn't know Donald Trump was president. He never knew that because he died before Trump became president.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't know what COVID. If you told
Yeah.
him what COVID was, he would go, "What is that?" Um, but also, he in the last 6 years, we've really figured out that the commodification of human beings and their time looking at a screen, that is what's
Yeah.
being sold, not the
Yeah.
music, not the it's the you are the product, you are the commodity. They're selling your likes, and these companies are selling your attention and how much time, and they've got all the metrics on how much time. They're not going to just hear this beautiful uh, uh, guitar solo on
Mm.
some
Yeah.
record and go, "That's beautiful." It's not about that. They're looking for the amount of time someone listened, when they tuned out of the show. They're writing
Mm.
shows created based upon the metric of when people turned it off or how many episodes they watched. Why isn't Blacklist popular anymore? Oh, because we already did that storyline. Okay, write a new story. And so the creators,
Yeah.
content creators, are now reacting to the metrics of why people turn them off.
Yeah.
The
and how
irony of
people
the
turn them on.
algorithm.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you blew my mind then when you said that, because I mean, I kind of lose track at times. I grieved Prince quite quickly, and because I'm surrounded by this music all the time, I came through the other side of accepting that he was gone quite soon, and basically he will never die to me, because there's more bootlegs that I can ever listen to. The estate are going to open up the treasure trove, in perfect stereo quality for me. So I kind of stopped chalking up the timeline. He didn't see a lot of what I consider to be this sort of like fourth turning of, that society is starting to really go down the pan. And I'm kind of relieved by that, but also I would have loved to have seen his reaction. Like,
That's
I can't
exactly
imagine
right.
that Minneapolis and
Exactly right.
George Floyd would have got to that sort of extent
Oh, think of
had he
that.
been
He didn't see
around.
that.
Yeah.
He didn't see pot start to become legalized. He didn't see the rightful uh, rights of the LGBTQIA plus community and trans rights and all these things that are important to us culturally and societally, or they're important to some of us. That Prince was a great barometer of our society. Real good artists always are. They are sort of a reflection, and it's to see what he would have been able to do. That's why I say, and I don't want to rain on your parade either, but you can release all the stuff in the vault at one time, all for free, which I think they should do. I think they should just give it out for free. I think that would be a really beautiful gift that someone could help his fan, help him make, and just give it out for free. But he'll never walk in a room again and play live. And that, to me, not because it's self-serving, because I don't have to be the one mixing him, but the fact that you can't get in that room with him and have air move with his actual body and spirit and mind in that room. That's I'm not deifying him, because he had a billion flaws, but to be around that sort of creative thing in a live setting and in the room with him, we all know what it's like to see an artist we love for the first time. I don't care if it's Brad Pitt, you see him on the street, or whether it's Prince in concert, and we feel that way. And then we want to be, but you can't see Brad Pitt and then watch him act in a whole movie. That doesn't happen. You can just see Brad Pitt. But Prince, you could see him and then get to experience me enveloped in the same sound that he was, and you shared an experience. And Prince fans understand that really, really well. And the fact that that's never going to happen is sort of painful. But if I can get over it, anyone can. So
I agree with you. But I went to the celebrations where they had, the gig at the Target Center and the Armory, where you would have Prince on video on the screen and a live band underneath him, with Kirk doing the musical director role. And I thought, why not just go to Berkeley, sweep up an entire year of students, teach them how to play that music with yourself on sound, Morris, Hayes, Kirk, people who knew how to, direct the bands and make a band work, and then send that out on the road like a touring outfit, a musical, and that's a way, because Brian will never get to see Prince live.
No,
I was blessed, even though I'm, in a completely different country. I got to see him more times than I had years on the clock. So it was an amazing thing. But that I've witnessed that and thought that's close enough to win a whole legion of the next generation of fans if you just send that out on tour.
I believe that idea that I had and made public is a good one, where we take the January 21st, 2016 show, the piano show, the multi-tracks of that. And I would, and Kirk is my idea, to go out on the road and we play that back in the venues that they were played in Australia. And, or we play that January 21st show, the one at Paisley Park that was so special, that lightning in the bottle, performance, those 2 shows, and play them on the road in London, in Paris, in Munich, I'll go all over. And then Kirk and I do a question and answer session later with all the tough questions. Kirk's going to get some tough questions about that.
Oh, yeah.
Although I think people have gotten over that a little more and understood that Prince was responsible for himself ultimately.
Yeah.
But it would, just to give you, and I could certainly lend my humble opinion as to what he was going through on that tour, and what, but because there's a lot of autobiographical stuff in those shows, and you get to hear him just play piano and sing. And I would actually mix it live, where I had the tracks. I wouldn't just be playing back a stereo, you wouldn't just be at a listening party. I would actually mix it. After the show, when we did the Q&A, I would turn up just his vocal and listen to a portion, or listen to just to his piano playing, and talk about what was going on in that song, and listening. And I think that would be not only good for people in their healing, in the process of their healing, but also it would be instructional and informative, and hopefully inspire even that one I know it sounds kind of ethereal, but somebody in one of those rooms will go on to do great things, right?
Yes.
Probably many of people in those rooms. And just being on the end of something that inspires someone to go out and do something great is the greatest honor that any of us can have. Because the money we make, all the money I've ever made from touring, is probably gone. I mean, I saved a little, but not much. So it comes in and it goes out. So if it's not a money thing, then what is it? It's about inspiring those after us to sort of take up the mantle. I'm surprised that more engineers don't. Some do contact me and say, hey, I'm working on this. What do you think? And I listened to that interview you did with, yes, you can, and I wanted to ask you about this. I always encourage people to get a hold of me. I'm sure Susan feels the same way, although you can enroll at her class in Berkeley, but just to ask questions and question. And that's what Prince did in his whole career. And that's what a lot of artists I did with whom I worked. They've questioned things, and that's where great art comes from, questioning how things are done.
Yeah. So, Scottie, you mentioned about Prince's guitar tone. So when I started doing these reaction videos about a year ago, I'd look and I'm like, oh my God, he's using EMG active pickups. Then he's using Mesa amps. Like, it's almost like for like a metal band, his setup.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? And also using the active pickups, like how is it mixing that with the dynamics of the band and what was going on?
I think unless I'm wrong, he used EMG 81s and maybe 85. Maybe there's an 85 mixed in there, but he used EMG pickups. He used different pickups on different things. His Hohner Mad Cat, which I affectionately call the Crocodile Telly.
Yeah.
That's just a nickname I gave it because you can always tell it's that Hohner Mad Cat because it has part of the pick guard looks like a profile. I told Prince that. I was like, what are you going to use, the Crocodile Telly for that? And he said, what? And he usually didn't say what or what do you mean? He was too cool for that. But in that case, he said, what? And I said, oh, right there. That looks like a crocodile's face. And he said, oh. And so then he called it, I'm using the Crocodile Telly for that, which I thought was funny in 2002. He said that over the PA once. And Prince he used different guitars for different things. I think that guitar cost him, I mean, Chris might know the story. It was either 30 or 60 bucks. He bought it at like a guitar or a gas station or something.
A gas station. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy, but it shows you that it's not in the actual rig. And I know, Brian, behind you, you've got all sorts of stuff. You look like you could just jump in the band Night Ranger with that flying V. But and I bet you do know the solo from "Don't Tell Me You Love Me," even with the Paul
Brad Willis.
Brad Willis. Oh man, he's a great player too.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of guitars that Prince used, but as everyone knows, and you would probably admit, you really only need 3 guitars, and you only need 3 tones. You need a clean, a dirty, and a lead. You need and you need a either a Strat or a Telly, one of those two. Most people would say Strat. So a Strat, probably a Les Paul, and some sort of hollow body, Epiphone, Gibson, something. And you can get everything from those, right? But it's where they start to differ is where you start to get preference. I always thought the Hours Wall looked super cool, the white one. I love that guitar, that white, the Question of You guitar, I call it. It didn't sound great. It was brittle because it was, a piece of art, really.
Yeah.
I thought the Mad Cat sounded pretty good. It sounds like a Tele, so there's not that chunky bottom on the, you know, so it never sounded. And for Prince being a bass player, his tone was remarkably mid heavy. And I have a theory about that because just like his vocal, he thought that things always sounded like there was too much bottom and too much top. Like it's too much treble, it's too much bass. Well, what that says is that you're missing mids in your hearing. That is a telltale sign of people when they complain about hearing the things that they do. You can look to their hearing loss being in the area where they haven't described because they can't hear that. So Prince used to say, too much highs, to turn the treble down. And I would be out there going, what? Are you kidding? Like I can't even hear the hi-hat now if I did what he said. And then too much woofers, too much bottom. And I would go, what? That's just a kick drum going doom in someone's chest.
Yeah.
If anything, I don't suffer as an engineer that sin of making low end run all over a venue and you can't even hear because it's so much low end. My low end is always tight. I always make it go doom. It just sounds like a kick drum, a lower percussive drum. And I use high pass filters on a kick and on a bass. But Prince would complain about highs and lows. And I think it's because he had lost some mids in his hearing.
So is that something that you'd seen evolve over the time?
No.
Or was it already gone by the 90s?
It was there when his tone was like that in 92, 93 when we were touring.
Wow.
I had heard that tone. I think back then, Matt Larson put his rig together. He had a good rig back then.
Okay.
Around the era of Batman, he had a nice rig. He had chunky bottom, and he had kind of soaring highs. And then when that big tall rig went away, he went back to actual amps, and I think that's when we went back to that mid tone.
Have you tried to pinpoint where you think that loss of range occurred?
Oh.
Can you hear it through albums or live performances?
I'm not sure because I think he always on records. I think he got the tone he wanted. A lot of times he wanted just a clean tone. You would be amazed at how much it's remarkable how much he literally plugged a guitar into a DI into the board. He could do stuff just with a clean tone. And I remember he had an engineer, a Canadian fellow named Stu. I don't know Stu's last name. Stu was working with him. And I was in this control room with Prince. And Prince said, Stu, turn this on turn this on. He was going to play something for me.
Yep.
And it came out of Prince's pedal board. And Stu said, oh, hang on, and plugged it in. And then he patched in something at the patch bay. And then he rolled over to this Avalon and started to put on this compressor on Prince. And Prince said, no, I want this to go through those right into that. And he pointed to the tape machine. He said, come on, Stu. Come on now, Stu. I know you can do it. He just didn't want to go through all the stuff.
Yeah.
He wanted his Boss pedals and he wanted a decent amp. And I think he could have benefited from something like Edward Van Halen had that 5150, an amp with a post chunk sound. That low end came post. And something like that, I think Prince would have, if he would have had the ego to plug into one of Eddie. I know he respected Eddie's playing quite a bit. And he respected Angus Young and Malcolm Young from AC/DC quite a bit. Because he used to talk about that little guy. When he was talking about Angus, he used to say that little guy. And so he had favorite players.
Yeah.
And clearly Carlos Santana. And so, but his tone itself, I think it fit. It was in the constraints of time. He would just get a tone going.
Yeah.
And even Takumi would admit that at times it was sort of brittle and sort of high mid heavy. And for me out front, I would go, oh my God, like, do I need to actually add in some bottom to see if it's there? And I don't want to do that. I'm somebody who believes only in subtraction of a natural sound. And I would actually have to add a little bottom to get some low end. And that always sort of hurt my heart to do that. But
yeah, that's another thing I love about Prince. So like some of the effects units out now for guitar, you need a PhD just to learn how to turn it on. And like, I'm a firm believer in all my years of playing, the dives around Canada is good tube amp, a few pedals, your guitar and your fingers. some of the stuff out now where it's like, oh my God, are you serious? Like, if for some of the live rigs, if that went down, who's going to fix it? Or Prince was very simplistic with his setup, and he knew certain times, like he liked to hit the flanger at a certain point to give some effect with his solo, to kind of give it a new sense of dynamics and stuff. But he seemed to have kept it pretty simple what he had on stage with the pedal board.
Well, he had to. That was some of that was necessity. He had a Bob Bradshaw rig at one point, if I remember.
We heard
he had a Bradshaw rig. I don't. He had different formations and he used them, but he always. You have to remember, this is a guy who at Paisley Park was rehearsing a lot of times by himself, or he would come down to the soundstage and play guitar by himself. And I know that because I would leave rehearsal and I would only leave his guitar up and muted and the PA on, and then I would come back in the morning and it would be unmuted. So I know he came down at some point in the night and unmuted it and just played for a while and then set his guitar down and left. And on more than one occasion, Kirk would be called in the middle of the night. Prince had called Kirk and said, something's happening in the soundstage. What is it? And Kirk would drive out to Paisley Park and he'd go and stuff would be feeding back just because Prince left his guitar on, or he left, or a vocal mic started to feed back. Prince always had a live PA in rehearsal room or in the soundstage, either the MPG room or the soundstage, always live, mics always on. So in that spirit, he had to have something that he could work on himself when he wasn't employing a guitar tech who wasn't in town from New York or LA or London doing his guitars. And the easiest way was a guitar through a bunch of Boss stuff. No Zoom pedals, no 9010 or 9020, none of the fancy stuff, none of the Centaur compressor, just Boss pedals and an amp. And Prince could make all the magic from that.
Yeah. Here's an education for all the smaller regional players who are playing, want to gig every weekend to make money. I was originally like a hard rock metal shred guy. I was into some jazz fusion. I learned very quickly when I was younger, there's no money in that. So I sold my soul and I kind of started playing the country circuit. You know, I wasn't a great singer, but I'd also do some singing duties or whatever. But I learned very quickly, if you have your own production, when you're playing the small clubs, you're going to get more work. But I also quickly learned that we were talking about the kick drum. When it's hitting people, it's mixed, it's hitting people in the chest. That really helps get people up and get moving and dancing, which you want in a club, right? So without giving away all your trade secrets on that, like what were some of the things you would do with, you mentioned using a high pass filter, but with mic placement, types of mics, what would you do for the kick drum miking?
What I love, that's a great, you kind of sort of, without talking about it, you set the tee for me here. Yeah. Every artist, I decide whether or not they're built from the bottom up or the top down. It's Lady Gaga, that was a bottom up mix. It was all about the LGBTQIA plus crowd, her gay boys, as she called them. I have to do, it's got to move my gay boys, right? So she had all her audience members, and I needed to move the bottom end because a lot of times the LGBTQ plus community, IA plus community, doesn't feel like they have a church in life. So clubs, especially in the 90s and the 2000s, became the church for gay people. So that's what got people up and moving. That's what got their spirit moving. And having a lot of gay friends, I understood that. And I knew how to approach it, mixing an artist like Gaga, because I built her mix from low end. Scissor Sisters was still one of my favorite all-time bands to mix. They're top 2 or 3 for sure. Maybe number 1, believe it or not. Their mix was bottom up. Baby Daddy and Jake Shears, they said, Scottie, build that low end. It's great. So then I build the low end where I need it and then set the mix sort of on top of it. The Fray, Prince, believe it or not, anything I do in Asia, that's usually a top down mix. Got to be all the hanging PA, the articulation, the clarity, all of that. I bring the low end up to match that volume and intensity, just so it sounds full range. But there are some artists that I build that want a booming low end. They want a big, tough low end. And others I build from the top down to make sure that everything is heard, all the reverbs, the clarity, nothing is obfuscated by low end. So it's just the approach. And I would tell your viewers to think about, know your audience. Know your audience. That that goes whether you're releasing records, that goes whether or not you're a producer, whether you're a preacher, you're going to preach, know you're the people in the sanctuary at that time, like whatever it is, we all have to know our audience. And my wife taught me that phrase: know your audience. Who are you mixing for? What are you trying to achieve in this? And so building a mix from an EQ standpoint is actually a really good shortcut that I have. But yeah, I mean, nowadays you can't go into a gig and just lop down an amp and a bunch of strung out Boss pedals that are probably buzzing, and then get away with that for very long. Time is, there's crunch time and go time. There are companies like Yamaha who bought. I'm a big fan of their consoles. I use the Yamaha Rivage consoles live. I think they're completely musical, and it's when I walk up to a Yamaha Rivage console, I feel like I'm coming up to a musical instrument. I'm walking up to a musical instrument. Mm-hmm. It's not like an Avid S6L or a Profile, and it's not like a Digico. Those are clinical to me, and they're too clean, and they don't have any soul in them. You have to do things. You can get good sound out of them, but Yamaha, you get great sound, and it feels like that's a company that makes grand pianos and guitars and trumpets and violins and flutes and basses and montage keyboards, and that company knows musicality. So I forgot where I was going with the Yamaha thing, but it's built. They bought Line 6 a few years ago. Yeah, Yamaha bought Line 6. Well, you can go get this something called a Pod or a Pod Go. I know they have the Helix. You can get a Pod Go. I think it's called Pod Go, right?
Yeah.
With the RF unit in it. Like the great guitar player from Lee Helm's band, Jack Tamarat. You can look him up on YouTube. Phenomenal player.
Yeah.
Incredible note value, feeling, structure, emotion, everything. Jack is phenomenal. Jack, he's a Yamaha and a Line 6 guy, and Jack said, Scottie, this new Pod Go coming out, like it's got all the sounds from the Helix, but it's this big and it's got a wireless built right in. Yeah. I mean, for $500, you can get out of the whole game. Yeah. And you could just walk in and tell the sound engineer either mono or stereo, 1 or 2 cables. Here you go. And get your clean, crunch, dirty, your delays, your stereo stuff, all that. Yeah. And some people take advantage of that. Some people hold on to the past and want all those things in line, which invariably, with the amount of growing stages, lighting, and now video support, there's more RF in the air than ever. So on the ground, you have this giant antenna that's just picking up line level signal. And guitar players wonder why when they let go, it goes, and it's my job to sort of gate out that as much as I can, but then also go to them and go, say, we need to talk, we need to do something about that noise and start to isolate it.
When you were saying that, I remember doing a big New Year's gig, I'm going to say 2007 into 2008. I had in-ear monitors. The whole band had in-ear monitors, but I was picking up someone's cell phone, dialing or something, and I would start freaking out because I couldn't hear myself singing. But anyway, it's very much with all that, it's the world's going and it's moving, and it's like, as guitar players, and musicians, do we go with it, or like you mentioned the in-ear monitors? I think from using them, it's right in your skull. You can really tell if you're in key or not. But I think some of the bigger, older acts that started to turn to them, I think it was to save their ears and their hearing. But you were saying that you thought Prince might have had some hearing damage, and I can understand the resistance to the in-ears, because you feel like you're separated from the audience. It's weird for a while.
Yeah, and a lot of it, well, it started where people went, hey, it started for a couple of reasons. Musicians wanted to save their hearing. They figured they were better off with in-ear monitors than wedges being really loud. The second thing is production managers started to do the math on how much truck space and truck weight they were going to save by not having wedges and all these amplifiers to run the wedges. Yeah. And that makes a difference in the right-hand bottom corner of the budget. And also with playback becoming a new actual position in a band. Their playback engineers oftentimes now are in the photo with the band. So they are part of the show. So you have orchestras, click tracks, horn parts that are on tape. interstitial stuff, all this sort of video playback, that all comes, the audio for video playback, that all comes from the playback position. And when you have playback, you have to have a click track, right? And you can't have it because the musicians have to be on time with it. Well, you can't have a click track coming through a live wedge. So you have to have in-ear monitors. In the old days, when it was first being, before the ubiquity of playback, the drummers would just have headphones on because they'd be listening to a click from the playback. And the rest of the band is following the drummer anyway, right? But they can't tell if things get off either. So now everyone's used to it, and they all have their own color, and they all have their own like cool things. So they put them in, and they can hear better, and they are making an investment into their future. Although you can still hurt yourself if you have the wrong setup in with those.
I wanted to,
yeah. So I mean, I'm saying that it was driven on a three levels, three prongs in that thrust. One was saving hearing, one was saving money, and one was the proliferation of playback and click tracks and things that the band can't hear. I know when I work with the Revolution, there are times that when Wendy's singing, Wendy said, "You know what? Right there, I just need a little cue for that line of that song." You know, Prince's lyrics are so, sometimes they're sort of mixed metaphors, and Wendy said, "I just need help with that line," and so I recorded myself saying the line, just really quickly. And then, so it happens right before she needs to sing it. So that's a cue sheet, basically.
You were saying about how people can hurt themselves. I had a weird occurrence I wanted to share with the audience and with you. It was a country band playing a country dive in Canada. The sound guy, for whatever reason, they did the sound, but we still had our in-ear monitors. The aux sends, he just had it caked in reverb. I sang half the night. At the end of the night, I got through the night, but I was so sick, you know, when we were done and when I left, from all the reverb, like I was literally almost throwing up. I was so sick for quite some. And have you heard of that before?
Sure. That's just affecting your inner ear. And when you get, we all know that anyone who's been in music long enough has put on a pair of headphones and queued something up, and it was accidentally all the way up. And then what happens is you hear a tone or something that loud, and it's just you're actually, you go, it sort of throws your whole vision off in equilibrium before you turn it down and then start back again sheepishly and come up. And that's essentially what's happening, is you're affecting the movement of the inner ear and the cochlea. So when that happens, then you're in trouble. And repeated use of in-ear monitors, even without actual air between, you and hearing. Some people have pitch can be an issue. Some people have pitch issues because there's no Doppler effect. They'll have one ear that's slightly off from the other. And we all know this from, on occasion, you can listen to a tone when your headphones are out here. And when you put it on, it sounds a little bit sharper. You go, whoa. You go like that, and you go like this, and the song sounds a little sharper. That's just a Doppler effect of like when an ambulance goes by and the tone goes down as the ambulance goes by. Well, of course, it's not going down, but it has to do with air and movement and all sorts of stuff, and reflection. But in-ear monitors are certainly the way to go. Everybody, they're ubiquitous. We're all into it. It's good. It's a good thing ultimately. Yeah. And the next iteration of that will be spatial audio. And when I mixed Ame, this great artist in Taipei, in March and April, they came to me and said, "How would you like to mix in surround?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "How about Dolby Atmos?" And I said, "It'd be great. I'm up for it." Now the desks aren't ready to do it yet, at least the one I use live, nor are any of the other companies that make that level of desk. That's more like a post-production thing that you would use, somewhere with an SSL in post-production. And I said, well, I think we can figure out a way to do it. And we couldn't mix in Atmos because we couldn't get speakers on the ceiling pointing down. There are way too many lights throughout the venue. So I decided on 11.1, Dolby 11.1. So we mixed in Dolby 11.1. I worked with the great Master Tudu Chu, who is the most awarded Oscar, Golden Horse Award winner in sound effects and editing in Asian history. And we worked together and figured out how to make something. You have to know the size of the venue to know how fast it's going to move through the venue, through all the different speakers. And so we had to work out all that math. and put together just a phenomenal show that wasn't really trickery. It wasn't something that was just like, whoa, that's cool, stuff's coming from around me. We then went back to an end fire sound where it was coming from the speakers and where people saw it. It wasn't like I was putting guitar solos over there just to show what I could do. You have to use that stuff sparingly. It's more special if it's only used sparingly as an effect rather than just overwhelm people with that. So we used it for a lot of interstitial stuff and one particular sound where I was panning stuff around the venue, and Ame really wanted to show me off, panning stuff around a venue. So that'll be the next step for in-ear monitors. People will have sounds placed. There's a unit called the Klang, Klang, and you can get the app and put regular headphones on and try it out. It's quite stunning. And you can make things so if a guitar player is over here and one's over here, you can have them pan that way. And if you turn around and face the drummer, they will switch with you. Wow. And they will hold their position on stage. There are things that do that now. I don't think ultimately it's that important. It's almost like, again, where are we reaching the point of usefulness and masturbatory effort? Where is that level? Where
exactly.
And I just realized
that, but I kind of think that we're headed towards that, especially at post-COVID. Perhaps that virtual reality experience of a live concert is actually closer than we think now. Because I think that then that's all the technology get built, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. And the caveat with that is that most people, they can't set up 11.1 in their living room, but they can set it up in their headphones. So I'm glad to see at least that all this coding, and you don't need special coding for Dolby Atmos. It's very different than Dolby like 5.1 and things. Atmos doesn't require that. And that's really the invention of all inventions, because then you can hear things that go up and down and around the back. And it's all done with phase and delay and things like that. I mean, it's just you only have two sources, but doing that, or when you're watching your iPhone and you have these AirPods in, and I turn and the sound stays over here where my screen is, I go, oh, and I turn that feature off because it's weird, right?
Yeah.
But you might like that at a show. And maybe we'll get to the point where if we get one or two successful lawsuits against an artist for being too loud, maybe everyone will go to bringing their own headphones to a show and you can listen to a whole show. Prince was not beyond that. He did say to me, he asked me, did you go see the Beatles show in Las Vegas? And I said, yeah. Where the speakers are in the seats. He said, yeah. I said, that was cool. Yeah. And he thought that was cool, but that wouldn't work for Prince because you're dancing. You're sitting watching the Beatles show. Yeah. But I mean, so it doesn't really work, but
yeah, I kind of hope if that technology does become commonplace that it's in some way retroactive, because some of the best bootlegs I've got are the ones where they were recorded binaurally. And if it could put me back in the room even more. Can I ask you a question about bootlegs? And I don't want to, tread on any toes in any way. Something like 1988, The Trojan Horse, this soundboard recording where Prince is doing Just My Imagination cover, and it's one of his best guitar solos, certainly that any fan had heard. You get this bootleg just released to the market, the underground market, a few months after the gig in 1988, and it's absolutely perfect sound. And there's a part of me that thinks he knows he can't do it through Warner's, but it's such a document at that point in his career of how good he is live that isn't reflected anywhere else, that my suspicion is that he's the person who leaked that. I understand every other bootleg where it's, somebody's took a tape into a venue, but these soundboard ones just, they seem to have a little different provenance to me. Do you have any suspicions that he might have leaked stuff he was proud of in that way?
I don't know it for a fact, but if I'm to be really totally candid, I would say that yes, if you have so much that wants to get out and you don't want to go through the normal slow channel and process of releasing that, you just mix it and release it. Yeah. You can get it out. Now I can say that I'm very, very proud that my through the board mixes, they are almost impossible to find, because I took them and I told Prince, you're not going to find my board mixes out there. I challenged him. And one time he actually challenged me back and said, I found one of your mixes out there, made me come into Studio A, played it. And I went, holy shit, that sounds amazing. And it sounded like my mix through a board. But then right at the end of the song, you heard, all right, whoa. And you heard people clapping. And I looked at him and I went, that's a bootleg. That's just a microphone. There's no, and he ejected the DAT and ripped the, I don't know how, DATs are hard to rip open. He ripped the DAT open and just like pulled the tape out of a DAT. And he said, cool. And then I went, oh, I guess I'm done in here. And I left. So he thought he found one, but he didn't. It was a mic that was just right in front of the PA or something. I'm very proud that my DATs, I would record them, label them. I did everything short of photographing them because there wasn't even the ubiquity of cell phones back then where I would have thought but I did make all his security guys sign that day. I would date it for them. They would sign that I gave them 2 DATs and 2 video cassettes or whatever. And then, and I have a pile of those from Madonna, from Prince, from certain artists that I turned these over to you. And you can't find them out there because they went directly back to Dave Hampton, who cataloged them in to the vault at Paisley Park. And eventually they ended up at Iron Mountain. I suspect at some point they will all be released, or they'll have to come to me and say, how did you do that? Or what date was this or whatever. It's all on the DATs, but that would be interesting to hear shows like that, especially the after shows. But yeah, absolutely. Getting back to the original premise, for sure. I mean, if Prince had, I'm not directly accusing him of doing that, but when you had almost nobody that had access like that and the time to put up a tape and then mix it and not even master it, just bounce it down to 2 and then get it on a format they could get out of the building. It had to have been. I mean, that's my suspicion would be yes. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, by the way. I think what held him back from admitting it, if he did do it, would be that it would violate some sort of contractual thing he had with the record company. But yeah, if he was really proud of something, he'd release it. Sure, why not? Why not let it go? Why not let it grow legs?